Do you feel like a hostage negotiator, constantly negotiating between the business teams and the security team? Early in her career, so did Sandy Dunn. But as you mature, so does your approach to security. In this throwback episode, Sandy talks about simplifying knowledge management and becoming a business listener, enabling you to make the right decisions. I hope you enjoy this episode and have a Merry Christmas. Everyone here at Security Weekly wishes you a happy holiday season.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
Broadcasting live, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Sandy Dunn is Chief Information Security Officer for a large healthcare in Idaho with over 20 years in cybersecurity. Initially starting out in software and hardware sales, she worked with the NSA, JPL, Secret Service, IRS, and other federal agencies. Her roles in cybersecurity have included competitive intelligence, security engineer, information security officer, senior security strategist, and IT security architect. She prioritizes a risk-based, business-focused cybersecurity strategic approach through process standards and threat intelligence. She is an adjunct professor at Boise State University and their cybersecurity program, a frequent speaker on cybersecurity, and helped organize the first B-Sides Boise event in Boise, Idaho. Sandy, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Well, thank you for having me.
Now, I think you've been on other Security Weekly podcasts in your history. I think this is your first time on Business Security Weekly, though, so welcome here, but welcome back to the network.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
So as we were preparing for this, there was something that just stood out during our prep call that I created the topic for this one, and the title was hostage negotiator to business leader. I thought that was a really interesting take on kind of your journey in cybersecurity. Give us a little bit of background on the hostage negotiation start to your career.
Well, I think any CISO can relate to the fact of trying to bridge the gap between your program and the business. Trying to help everyone understand how to prioritize, how to build out, simple things like why every production environment needs a test and dev environment. So asking them to slow down and include security testing or defining security requirements before they rush a product out the door. So when I talk about hostage negotiations, I really see it as when you look at a hostage situation, you have one person, two upset parties, and you're trying to get everyone to the table to so you can move forward and nobody dies in the process.
You mean slow down the business, Sandy? Who would have thought? You can't do that.
Yeah.
Now, Jason, you probably have very similar situations where, it's that constant kind of negotiation between the business teams, security teams, trying to integrate security capabilities, but also not slow down the business, right?
That's the key, right? And it's funny that, Sandy brings up hostage negotiation. I've always called myself the mediator, you know what I mean? Where you're coming into the business and really trying to enable the best practices while not be seen as a roadblock to the business. And that's really the act of magic that we have to perform as CISOs is really be able to walk in the door and show we can enable the business while at the same time protecting the business and really start shifting that mindset as being that roadblock, and that's the art. That's the art of negotiation.
Right. And also saying that we need their help, almost crowdsourcing security into the business, 100%. Saying, we need your support to do this well. Like it can't be just a team of people in a silo. I mean, and we talk about it as CISOs, Jason, I'm sure you and Ben talk about this all the time, that when you're going out and building a culture, part of that is not only getting everyone to think about security, but also helping them realize that we can only protect a business if we're all trying to do it together. We've got to be working together to protect the business. We can't be at odds. If our internal teams are the ones that we're trying to catch or detect, that's a huge problem.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, the term is played out at this point, shared responsibility. But I'll say years ago, I used that to my advantage as much as I could to really hit home with the other business unit leaders to say, and ultimately the seed I was trying to plant is, I can't do this without you. My team can't do this without you. So let's create relationships up and downstream. Myself and yourself as a business unit leader that all report up to the CEO. Let's find the relationships at the director and VP levels so we can start building the relationships there. And then ultimately come up with a plan to have this be a level of accountability and responsibility across the entire business, to the point where I started working with business unit leaders to have liaisons within their department, having staff within their team, let's say the finance team, the office of the CFO, or in HR, and have folks dedicated to being engaged with us on a frequency, on a regular basis. We had a cadence with them. So they were the evangelists within their business unit.
Yeah,
right.
I'm delivering that as well, Jason, like we're using kind of that business information security officer or security champions, right, to embed in the business. Their day job is, like you said, finance, legal, development, but they've got some type of responsibility, some dotted line back into the security org. And, I think you really have to build that pull, not just the push of security. And it really has to become everybody's role. Some part of it has to be related to security within the company. I mean, it's just like quality used to be.
And as important as that is, I also want to push, I feel very strongly about myself and everyone on my team listening, as much as telling them about security and why it's important, but being a great listener too, and understanding about their job, what's the challenges that they have. Because, something as simple as, from a security perspective, we may be saying, hey, we want you to log in from a jump box because of the security benefits to it. But if we don't understand how that impacts their efficiency or their ability to do work, then we may have just created something where all of a sudden they can't meet their goals. They can't, we've set them up to fail. So, as much as I like to talk about security, I think it's really important to be a listener too.
It's absolutely imperative, right? And we as security professionals and security teams need to understand that part of our responsibility is to learn the business. So that has to be part of our everyday, where we're learning the business. And the only way to do that is to listen to the business units, right? And have them tell us about their processes and what they're doing on the daily, and really, their strategic goals and where they're heading for the next fiscal year, their outlook and their plan, and really learn the business of each business unit. So that way, holistically, you have that view across the entire organization.
But more than, and sit with them, right, Jason? I mean, do more than just say, oh, okay, here's your sales objectives. But really, I mean, going even into a deeper level and sitting with them and trying to understand how they do their jobs, so that you have that information. And then when you go back and you solution it, you should be able to come up with something that is reasonable and moves the whole business forward.
Yeah. And the benefit of doing that and really understanding the process and what they do on a daily basis is now you can have that, 40,000 foot view of the entire organization and start realizing economies of scale across business units, right? That's the beauty of learning the business of, and really being a partner to every business unit. I found it very beneficial. You can start seeing trends between different business units and realize economies of scale.
Yeah, and none of this is, you mentioned that. I mean, it's not like we're coming up with ideas that people haven't discussed before, but making sure that you're being open, let people find your team approachable, so that they know that, hey, we don't understand what you do. Don't be worried about asking us a dumb question. I'd ask you a dumb question if I asked something about finance. Come to us, let's talk about what you're trying to do, and let me explain what we're trying to do, and let's figure out how to move the best path forward. And that's really, when I talk about negotiations, that's what I'm trying to get to, is I want to make sure that they're successful and getting their help so I'm successful.
We talked about relationships and listening to the business. The other thing we talked about a little bit as well, Sandy, is our language. How do we simplify that? Cybersecurity can be a very complex topic. So how do you make that really understandable by the different business units that may know nothing about security, just like you may not know anything about finance, right? Like, language matters here in these conversations as well, doesn't it?
It does. One of my experiences with it was I was in talking to customer service and talking about social engineering. And I'd went on for probably a good 35 minutes before I realized that they had no idea what I meant when I was saying social engineering. Like, that term did not make sense to them. And I was like, well, okay. Well, social engineering is basically people who are lying and trying to trick you. And then all of a sudden it made sense. And I think the one that we talked about, Matt, was, insider threat. And that, if you think about it, that really sounds terrible. I'm walking in and telling a bunch of people that I don't trust them. Is there a better way? Is there a better word to use? When I was down at HISAC, they talked about, instead of saying insider threat, maybe we should go to people and say critical asset protection. To me, that sounds a lot better than accusing people, of basically being the problem, even though it may, in some cases, be true.
Yeah, Sandy, we operate in a vacuum sometimes, right? Isn't that, don't you think? We kind of think about it in the context and the terms that we use. And I think you're touching on a really interesting point that I've really started to spin on. We need to think about the psychology of what we're trying to accomplish, and both in business terms and also interpersonal terms, like how to get the things that we need accomplished by using a more intelligent way to get there, right? We use the hammer a lot, and I think it'd be a lot more helpful to use the carrot and try to get to a point of positivity with both our customers and our internal stakeholders.
Yep. I one of the pieces of advice was what my mother told me about getting my children to eat vegetables. She said, well, you keep talking about that they have to eat vegetables. Why don't you tell them that it gives them superpowers and they'll get stronger and faster and better? And all of a sudden my kids were, loved vegetables, because instead of telling them they had to eat vegetables, I was pointing out all the benefits of what would happen when they ate vegetables. So you're exactly right. I mean, it really is about psychology. And the interesting thing is it's psychology that we learn every day when we're out in our normal relationships.
Right. So how do we convince people that multi-factor authentication is actually beneficial?
Well, my serious answer to that is quit calling it multi-factor authentication. I mean, like, somehow we've got to be able to tell people, like, this is your second key to protect your assets or something, like, and then give them the ability, give them as simple a process as possible to follow what we're asking them to do. Instead of, like, there's so many choices. They have Duo, they have Authenticator. Now Microsoft has one. For the people in my life who aren't technical, all I'm doing, I'm picking the one that I want them to use because I know I have to support it. And then I'm giving them a very simple step-by-step thing to follow so that I don't get too many follow-up questions.
That's a great way to think about it. I think the industry's done itself a little bit of damage with the language, right? Because think about this for a second. Insider threat, multi-factor authentication, security awareness, we could go on with a number of terms, right? Came from analysts, right? We've created these sub-markets around them. And then as security practitioners and vendors, we market the crap out of these terms that may or may not resonate very well with like who we're trying to actually protect, like our employees or even consumers in some respects, right? So have we done ourselves some damage by just using some of this language instead of trying to keep it more simple?
And really, I think that was the point when you and I were having our pre-call, is what I was trying to make is take a step back and try to look at your communication from their perspective. For whoever you're working with, try to take a step back and say, okay, if all I knew was, legal, I'm an expert at law, and I'm not very technical, would what she's saying make sense to me? So that was really kind of the outcome of this meeting. I was hoping to discuss with everyone was just like, is there an opportunity to be better communicators? And I'm using the term hostage negotiations.
I mean, ultimately, Matt, this is why leadership and communication segment exists, right? It's to start having those conversations with current and future cybersecurity leaders on effective communication where, you can know your audience and deliver it correctly and really start aligning to the business, right? And speaking their language versus, a CFO who's going to look at us like a technical wonk if we're coming at him with all of the techie speak. We're trying to break that, right? We're trying to break the fact that it's not just technology. We need to speak the language of the business.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally agree.
So, Sandy, the last topic we touched on a little bit was curiosity. I'm curious how curiosity has kind of fueled your cybersecurity career. Obviously, you've matured and changed your approach over the years because you started on the very technical side. Now, as Chief Information Security Officer, we're talking about being a business listener and talking about communication and language and how it matters and how to simplify it. But how has curiosity played a role in that maturity as well?
Well, so for me, being curious is what's driven my whole security career. I'm just always wondering how things worked or why it worked. And I think when you and I were talking about it, Matt, I was, where I'm at right now is I look at different things, even clear back into leadership and history and things, always being curious about, is there a way to do this better? Is there a way, why don't the people understand where the issues are? Why is it such a problem? Why, why do people share so much on social media? That's baffling to me. Why don't they verify facts? Just always trying to understand the why behind what makes the momentum of the cybersecurity profession in general. I'm just curious.
Have you ever thought about kind of what's next for you? Because Ben and Jason and I talk about the evolution of the CISO role and where does it go next, right? And we've talked about a couple particular paths that the CISOs could move to. Chief Risk Officer, a good friend, John Frederickson, was a CISO, now a Chief Risk Officer. We were talking right before the segment because a few of us know him. Are you curious about where your role evolves now that you're a CISO? Like, what's next for Sandy? What kind of curiosity is there?
Yeah, and so that's a great question because I did struggle with it a little bit because I really love being a CISO, but always driven by challenges. So, okay, now, no, what do I do? And that's part of the reason I started teaching was because I'd never created a course before. And, and I went into it very naively, not really knowing what I was doing and learned a lot along the way. I have some ideas on the future, but I think you touch on a really important point, which is, I think most of the people who are CISOs there's something that attracts you to a dumpster fire if you want to be a CISO. I mean, there's something that you love being right in the middle of a great big disaster and trying to figure out how to make it work better. And as soon as you kind of get the plane righted, you're ready for the next big disaster. So I think I have my path figured out, but it's important to always keep that in front of you. What kind of thing? What thing makes you really excited and kind of scares you at the same time?
So is the chief dumpster fire officer pre or post chief information security officer?
I think it's almost a subtitle to your CISO. I mean, I started reading, They Tell Me This Is How the World Ends, and the complexity around the sale of 0 days and vulnerabilities. And, I was listening to your guys' podcast, I think it was from last week, where you're talking about healthcare in general and IoT on the network. I mean, we have an unbelievably complex problem to solve.
So the answer to that, Matt, is, my risk mind comes into play. And the questions I have is, how big is the dumpster and what are the contents?
Yeah, really. It's true.
Right. That's what I'm wondering. Is it pre or post?
That matters. Well, it matters. Matters.
Yeah, it does. And I say that all the time because as CISOs, we get job offers from all over the place. And I think the thing that keeps you're always afraid of a suicide mission. You're afraid of jumping into something where you can't be successful.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge with a lot of organizations, right? Is they haven't figured out. Matt, you and I have talked about this for sure. I think Jason, we have too. Like, companies aren't sure what they want, and so even if they say they want a CISO, many times, like, do you really want a CISO, or are you just looking for a director of security, right? And based upon that mismatch, yeah, a lot of CISOs find themselves in places that they aren't aligned to, either because of the type of CISO they are, or what the company's looking for, or just, we want a CISO, but there's no funding, there's no resources, and, have fun. It can be a really disheartening role when you get in something like that.
Yep. And hey, by the way, you're buried 3 levels deep into the leadership team.
Yeah.
That is true. I mean, because it's, that matters, I think, for a lot of people to figure out, like, what is that role and what is that alignment? And am I walking into a dumpster fire, and do I want a dumpster fire? Because, for me, that's not what I would want. That's not at all, right? And so how do you know that?
I don't mind it being a huge wreck.
Yeah, some people
I like it when it's a huge disaster. I mean, I do. I love it when your heart's pumping and your mouth is dry. I mean, I don't mind that. But I do want to at least think that I can solve the problem. Sandy, I like high pressure situations.
But when you head in, Sandy, are you asking if I can bring a can of gas to the fire and just clean it out and start fresh? Can I pack a new dumpster in?
Well, I do want to solve it, but I don't mind that it's burning and on fire, as long as I have some help with the fire extinguisher. And it really comes
do you
down
enjoy
to
post breach?
What was that?
Do you like post breach? Do you like post breach? Is that your thing? Do you enjoy getting in after there's been a big issue and kind of coming in and fixing it?
Yeah, I do. I like it. So I really like trying to figure out, how did we get here and how did we get out? I mean, it's the complex problems. What I hate, like the worst job in the world to me is when it's just the same old dry stuff every day.
Jason, you like the dry stuff?
I do not like the dry stuff at all. But, for me, it's are you enabled to win the game, right?
Yes.
So it's having the conversation up front with, if you're applying for a CISO role or you're moving into a CISO role, it's figuring out whether or not the game is set up for you to succeed, right? So can you win the game? Can you measure the game? Those are all important things to me, because if your support system doesn't allow you to measure and win the game, you're in a losing battle, obviously, right? So, I'm not gonna put myself in a position where it's inevitable failure, right? You have to have that support system of upper management, the CEO, the board of directors, your business unit leaders. Otherwise, you're just going to be crawling uphill the whole time.
And they have to be open to hearing the truth. Mm-hmm. Like if they want you to come in every time and say, "Yep, everything's great," that's not. Yeah, you have to be able to feel comfortable that you can be open and transparent and tell the truth.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's super critical.
Agreed. Gentlemen, any additional questions while we have Sandy?
Good to go.
Awesome.
Yep.
Sandy, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you, guys.